In this lesson, I'm going to look at business literacy module on workplace data. I think it's module 10 for the ICB, and normally this is a question on the break-even graph. So you'll get a graph like this, and there's numbers on the graph, and without knowing what it is for, it will have very little meaning for you. So let's have a look at it. There on the left-hand side, on your y-axis, you have the price or the cost as it is expressed in rand. And what you are doing is you are measuring this against the number of units that you are selling or that you are making, the quantity in units that is on your horizontal axis or then your x-axis. On this graph, you will find a number of lines. Two of them start at 0 and then go on from there. They rise from there. The first one is a little steeper than the second one. The steep line that starts at 0 and then goes up is your total revenue curve. Just think about it. It's logic. If you do not sell anything, you are not making any money. But the more product you are selling, the more units you are selling, the more money you will be making. The other one that starts at 0 and is not as steep as your total revenue curve is your variable cost curve. Variable cost curve is the cost that you incur as you make units. So if you are not making any units, you will have no variable cost. There will be no material cost involved. There will be no direct labor involved. But there will always be some cost involved, and that is the fixed cost. And the fixed cost will, in this case, in any case, it remains constant at 7,500. And think of that as salaries that you have to pay, water and electricity, telephone expenses, things like that, that you will have to pay whether you make anything or sell anything or not. And so the last line, the fourth line, will start on your fixed cost and it will run parallel to your variable cost. And that is, of course, your total cost curve. Now, we call all of them curves, although in this particular case, they are not really very curvy. They are just lines. Okay, and that is what you will get on your break-even graph. And then the most important thing, there where your total cost and your total revenue intersect, that little point there, that is your break-even point. Now, what does the break-even point mean? It means that, in this case, if you do not sell at least 10 units, you are not going to make a profit. The moment you sell 10 units, your cost and your income is the same, and so you are not making a profit, but at least you're not making a loss either. If you're selling anything less than 10, then you're going to operate at a loss. If you sell anything more than 10 units, then you begin to show a profit. And as you can see here, that profit margin increases, gets wider, the space between these two lines, the more product you sell. So you will get this in a test or an exam or an assignment. They will give you a graph like this, and then they will ask you a number of questions. And the first question is always the same. They say, create a mathematical formula for the total revenue curve, the total cost curve, the variable cost curve, the net profit curve, and the gross profit or the marginal income curve. Just to note there, gross profit and marginal income is exactly the same thing. Now, we are going to start with the total revenue curve, but we are not going to do the total cost curve second. And that is because, as I just showed you, cost has two components, a variable component as well as a fixed component. So if we are going to come up with a mathematical formula for the total cost, it will include the variable cost in any case. So we might as well do the variable cost curve before we do the total cost curve. Okay. Total revenue curve, do this curve first. where do we begin? We start at the break-even point. Now, you are already familiar with that now. When you sell 10 units, and we read that from the horizontal axis, you make 12,500 Rand. We read that from the vertical axis. And now we are able to calculate the sales price of 1 unit. It is simply the 12,500 divided by 10, and so we see that the sales price for 1 unit is 1,250 Rand, and however much you sell, the quantity that can be multiplied by this sales price per unit to get your total sales or revenue. And so therefore, the formula for the total revenue is simply total revenue is equal to 1,250 times Q, or simply 1,250Q, but in this case, the Q and the 0 look a little bit too much the same, and so therefore I separated it by the multiplication sign. Next one is our variable cost curve, the one that we are doing second. And we pick a point that is easy to identify on this curve. And now remember, we are talking about this curve now. So I picked a point at 20 units because I can easily see that when I am making 20 units, I have a variable cost of 10,000, and those were just nice round numbers to use. So, same as we did with our sales price, I can now calculate the cost price of 1 unit. It is 10,000 divided by 20, and that is 500 Rand. And once again, however much you produce, the quantity can be multiplied by 500 to get the variable cost. And so therefore, the formula is variable cost is equal to 500 multiplied by the quantity. Now we can look at the other three. Okay, now we are going to create a mathematical formula for the total cost curve, the net profit curve, and the gross profit curve. But once again, net profit is equal to gross profit minus your fixed cost. So we might as well calculate gross profit before we calculate net profit again. Okay, let's look at the total cost curve first. And remember, we are doing that after we've already came up with a formula for the variable cost curve. So total cost is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. We just calculated the variable cost as 500 times Q. We can read the fixed cost from the graph. It remains constant at 7,500. And so the formula for total cost is 500Q plus 7,500. That will be our total cost formula. Now we are going to have a look at, remember, the gross profit first. So the gross profit curve, we do this before we do net profit. The gross profit is equal to our total sales minus our total cost, and we've calculated both of these already. So the gross profit is 1,250Q minus 500Q, and so it is 750Q. So however many we sell, we can just multiply it with 750 Rand, and then we know what our gross profit will be. Last one is our net profit curve. The net profit is equal to the gross profit that we just calculated minus the fixed cost that we already know. And so we can put that in a formula like that, saying net profit is equal to 750 times Q, the quantity, minus 7,500. Now we have all the mathematical formulas that we need and that we were asked to do. And the thing that I'm doing now is I'm transferring these formulas that I've just came up with on the next page so that I can now do the calculations with considerable ease. So, first question says, calculate the expected net profit if 45 units are sold. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this formula here, my net profit formula. I know that it is 750Q minus the 7,500, and now I simply replace the Q with the 45 that was asked there, and therefore my net profit is 750 Rand times the 45 minus 7,500, and so my net profit, if I'm going to sell 45 units, is simply 26,250 Rand. Next question, what is the marginal income if 15 units are sold? Now, I told you already that marginal income and gross profit is exactly the same thing, and there we have our gross profit formula. So we simply put that down. You know that gross profit is 750 Rand times Q. I can now replace Q with the 15 units that was asked there in the question. Therefore, the gross profit is 750 Rand times 15, and it is 11,250 Rand if I am selling 15 units. Then the next question says, they say we must prove that the total cost curve is parallel to the variable cost curve. Now, what you need to do here is just follow the steps as I'm going to give them to you, because there's a rule involved here, and we assume that you understand the rule. Okay, we know that the gradient of the variable cost curve is 500, because there it's 500Q. So the gradient is 500. We also know that the fixed cost is constant. So the gradient of the total cost will also be 500. Because if you have a constant that you are adding to the curve, the variant does not change. That's the rule. I only want to see that you know the rule, and so you can answer this question by writing those three little statements there. Then the last question, and this is the only one that requires a little bit more thinking. It says Jack makes a bulk purchase of 50 units and our gross profit is 35,000. So what percentage discount did we give him? Okay, follow the reasoning. We know that the gross profit is equal to our total revenue minus our variable cost. And when we give a discount, the revenue will change, but our cost will stay exactly the same. So the 35,000 gross profit that is given there in the question that I've got is equal to my sales price times 50 minus my variable cost times 50. But remember, my variable cost, I can use the 500 because it didn't change. Then I simply make the sales price component, that term, I make that term the subject of my formula. So SP times 50 is equal to 35,000 plus 25,000, because only thing that really happened is that this 500 times 50 here that was negative went across the equal sign, so it becomes positive. And then only thing I want to do is I want to divide both sides of the equation with 50. So 60,000 divided by 50 is 1,200. And so we now know that I sold the units to Jack at 1,200 per unit, as opposed to the normal price of 1,250. So really, I only gave him a 50 Rand discount per unit. Okay, so what do I do now? I express my new sales price, the 1,200, as a percentage of the original price of 1,250. I multiply it with 100, of course, to get the percentage, and I see that he paid 96% of the old sales price, or of the normal sales price. And if he's paying 96% of what other people pay, then it is 100% minus the 96. His discount was 4%. Now, what I want you to understand is that these questions never really differ. Yes, the physical quantity and the numbers, the Rand value of the units, that will change. The units that they expect you to calculate, that will change. But really, for the rest, this question stays exactly the same. And if you can do it once, you can do it always. Thank you.